But obviously, in recent days, we've had a brilliant series come to its conclusion between Australia and India in Australia. And it's funny, after the series, Australia captain Pat Cummins described it as living up to the hype. And I think he's probably right about that, isn't he? Because there was a lot of hope and expectation to this for this to be a real memorable series, and I don't think it's let anyone down, has it, Peter? It's been brilliant.
Yeah, well, everything that I've seen on the socials from people that have been at the games, from watching the games myself on TV, it's nice to see that most of the places have had big crowds. I think Sydney was sold out for the first 3 days, which is all they got anyway.
Yeah.
But um, MCG on Boxing Day, 90,000 people. That's and they got what a day they got. Sam Constance going out there and smacking the ball around on his debut in 19 years old or something like that. But yeah, I agree. I think it's lived up to the hype. There have been from test one through to test five. There have been um, moments to talk about in every single game, and I think what was great as well is that down to that last game, there was something on the line for both. Obviously, the World Test Championship final went for India, but for Australia, winning that last test meant that they got to the World Test Championship, and they also won back the Border-Gavaskar trophy, because if it had been a draw, or if India had no other way around, if India had won, then it would have been a drawn series. India would have retained the Border-Gavaskar trophy. So there was a lot on the line for both teams still, and it was nice that we had 5 tests, but every test mattered, and it's a bit of an advocacy for those 5 test series, or at least having series where something is on the line into the third test. What did you think of the series? There was plenty of drama in it, which, as I said, went throughout the whole five tests.
There was, I mean, it was for the entertainment factor. You couldn't have really asked for much more. You had kind of from the off, you could tell that, you could tell it was a series what meant a lot to those players. And yeah, I mean, it was nice that it kind of had yeah, it's good that it reached that level of hype, I think, because so often in the sport, you do get games where there's so much build-up, there's so much anticipation between fans and in the press, and so often it just kind of, never kind of comes to fruition. But I feel like with a recent series between these two, they're always lively and they're always interesting because neither team wants to lose to the other. And I think India probably going into this series probably thought that maybe it wasn't the best time to play in Australia because at the end of the day, there's never really a good time to play Australia apart from, going back sort of 10 years. But when when England won in Australia, that was probably the most ideal time anyone's had um, to play Australia. And we had them at a good time where we had a team that was peaking and had an Australian team who was kind of on the way out. So I think before this series, I didn't really know quite what to expect. I was kind of thinking of an Australia win purely just because of how much kind of India's batting's kind of let them down over the course of the year. Um, but somehow I thought it would have been a bit closer than the 3-1, and I think in certain games it was. But I mean, overall, I don't really think India can have too many complaints to how it panned out because Australia on home soil, you know, India likes, India have this good record of playing at home, but Australia at home, in front of these massive stadiums sold out. I mean, it's a place where England have struggled over the years, but I think India, to an extent, I think they got found out a lot in this last series.
Yeah, I mean, I think against New Zealand as well, the Indian batting lineup was quite flaky. Rohit Sharma, the fact that he was dropped for the final game, I think proves everything. The man that could never be dropped was eventually dropped. I think, yeah, just shows that Indian team was not looking at its strongest in terms of the batting lineup anyway. Nitish Kumar Reddy, I think, was probably their best batter, and he was a debutant in the first game. And Rishabh Pant, maybe in a couple of games he could have reined it in and he gifted wickets away. There was a moment in I think it was the Sydney Test where he ramped the ball basically straight up in the air in a time where India really needed him to dig in. And I get that's the way that he plays, and he gifted his wicket away. But even still, he was probably up there with Kumar Reddy as being one of the better batters. I think India. Well, actually, no. Before I go on to India's bowlers, I will say that I don't think Australia were that much better with the bat. Um, I think Head got 100. I think Smith got 100. I think that's it. I can't think of anyone else getting big runs in terms of hundreds. I think what India what start again. What Australia did better than India in this series was that their team responded when they weren't relying on one person. Their batters stood up when they needed to, their bowlers stood up when they needed to, and they almost shared the responsibility of the 3-1 victory. Whereas in reality, India were kind of waiting for Bumrah to blow the Australian batters away for two and then go and score 180. So they sort of have like a bit of an advantage. Do you know what I mean? Do you see that? I think apart from Bumrah, there were some flaky performances from India.
Yeah, I mean, Bumrah, I've just got the stats up there. I mean, Bumrah took 32 wickets across the series. Um, the other two in the top three were Australians. You got Cummins with 25 and Scott Boland with 21, who, you know, I mean, I might come at the Boland a bit later on, but I might just say this sort of bit now. Boland's an interesting one because to me, he kind of feels like Australia's Chris Woakes in the sense that at home, he's fantastic and you know he's going to take wickets and cause problems. But I mean, I don't know if he's played any of the tours to be honest, but I know when he came over for the Ashes, when they were last in England, he really struggled. And he couldn't kind of make things happen with the ball at the times when Cummins kind of turned to him for help and for him to do his part. But 21 wickets against an Indian side is even if they were sort of out of nick, it's brilliant. It's brilliant form. But just going back to Bumrah, yeah, I mean, it was a case of you look at some of the scorecards across the series, and India they just it never felt like they were gonna really consistently outbat Australia. And I totally agree that Australia weren't that much better, but it's kind of the old adage of they didn't have to be much better with the bat because India made it easy for them, really, because we saw some of the weaknesses were kind of got highlighted in India's home series against New Zealand. And I think what's got to be a bit of a concern to India is, any hopes that that was just a one-off kind of got blown apart because they went to Australia and although Australia did bowl well, they weren't, I could argue that they weren't at their most kind of critical best at times with the ball. But again, I don't think they needed to be because India were just, there was no sense of like trying to kind of build from the ground up with some of the India batting. And I think, it's one of these where the proof's in the pudding really, and that being the scorecards where you never really expected India to go out and just dominate enough across this 5-match series. And it's simple things like that where it's where Test matches and Test series are won and lost. Where if you can't outbat an opponent more often than they outbat you, then it's going to end in defeat. It doesn't matter how well you've got. I mean, Bumrah's got 32 wickets in a series and he's on the losing side. I mean, he'll be sitting there going, "Well, I did my part, lads."
Yeah, and I mean,
There's not much more he could have done, really.
well, no, this is it, and I wonder. We're playing hypotheticals here, but I wonder where the game would have gone if Bumrah was able to bowl in that second innings in Sydney. because the pitch was clearly doing something. The game ended in just over 2 days, really, if you think about it, because it was lunch and a bit, and then Australia smashed off that final 160, I think they were chasing. So the game didn't last particularly long in Sydney because the ball was just moving everywhere. Bowden got all his wickets because he was bowling little 84 mile an hours that would nip away at the last minute. Not taking nothing away. Some of those balls were absolutely beautiful. Um, but that was the nature of the pitch. And I do wonder if Bumrah had been able to bowl, whether he would have made any difference, because some of the some of the bowling at the end there was pretty bad, um, and Bumrah could have been a bit of a line leader. I think it's just showing there was a bit of over reliance on him. And another person that they've relied on for years and years and years that didn't really show up. He got 100 in his first match in Perth, but not much after that, was Virat Kohli, who I think made headlines after Perth for basically getting riled by a teenager.